Hey fellow mobs, Moby here. Welcome to Armored Legends. In this series, we interview some of the best players in the world and have them share their strategies, builds, and tech. Today, I have RamenRook and JC with me, both masters of the BVO playstyle.
Hi guys, I'm RamenRook. I started playing Armored Core 6 about a week after it launched. I really dove into PvP after S-ranking all the missions, but what really kept me around was how wholesome and welcoming the community was that I found myself in. So thank you, everyone.
Yeah, I'm astonished how wholesome the community was, especially strikers. My name is JC. I got into Armored Core 6 after I tried out the older Armored Core games on an emulator, and I really love the premise of missions and building the perfect mech. Totally in love with Armored Core 6, and it's definitely a game that I want to get really good at.
How do you two know each other?
We met in a striker fight club. That was our first interaction. Yeah, so we both ended up doing the BVO style separately, and at that point I was already more established than JC was. So I just DM'd JC and I was like, hey man, you want to spar and maybe we could teach each other some things. And then after that
I said hell yeah,
friends ever since.
So what is BVO exactly?
BVO is an acronym that stands for Basho, Viento, Ocellus. What that is an archetype of lightweight AC, typically with Noctriher legs, that will CQC and then punish with a melee weapon.
Can you explain why it was the only lightweight around in the highest levels of the tournament?
The problem with lightweights is that we have this really small time window to stagger the opponent, and the only pistol that was light enough that could do that, instead of Zimmers or something, Zimmers were too heavy, was Vientos. Ducats kind of come close, but the recoil on Ducats is just hard to manage. Vientos were really the only one. We have Basho arms to kind of make up for our lack of primary damage in the arms with a melee on the back. But actually on their own as well, they have pretty good defensive value for their cost.
The term is stat density. Basho has low firearm specialization and low recoil, but Ocellus has the max close range. So the funny thing is, Ocellus at 90 close range, it carries the entire thing. So despite Basho's weaknesses, they're just completely negated by Ocellus. If you're playing hard lock with Basho Ocellus, your lock-on time is 21 frames, which is just about the fastest you can get with hard lock. And if you're on soft lock and you do a perfect job at tracking your opponent, you can get it down to as quick as 5 frames with the Basho Ocellus combo.
That actually checks out because I don't know if you guys saw Tyler Does Gaming's stat video.
Yes, I did.
Yes.
It was very
enlightening, yeah.
But I believe he says that staying within your FCS's optimal range is much more important than firearm stat for arms are.
You're right, yes.
So I noticed that there are some parts that you both use, such as the Alba core and the Santai generator.
The optimal BVO would actually want a Noctriher core, but the problem is EN. We want the most EN we can get, so the Santai generator gives that, but the problem is that you can barely fit the Santai on a Noctriher core. You'll get 1 to 2k efficiency, which is too little. So Alba core offers just the right amount, but also adds a little bit of defense on top.
You both also use the Noctriher legs and the Alula boosters.
We use those legs for one reason mostly, and that's jump stat or jump distance. Jump distance is added to your grounded quick boost, so if you want to effectively dodge something on the ground, you want a high jump stat for your legs. The reason we use Noctriher over, say, the Kasuar reverse joints is because as traditional bipedal legs, they get all of the benefits of being bipedal without the cost of a reverse joint. So reverse joints are known for their low stability as well as their floaty jumps, whereas Nocta legs are more akin to bunny hopping. And Alula is for quick boost.
The Alula boosters are actually pretty weak when it comes to vertical boosting, so how do you deal with opponents who are really good at that?
We actually catch up to them vertically using AB and hardlock, because Alula actually has really good AD. We don't really have to account for vertical performance.
I noticed that there are some key differences between your builds. For example, RamenRook, you use the Pulse Blade, the VP-44D head, and the 6-still back missiles.
So originally I was on Slicer, but this patch I've decided to move to Pulse Blade. And the reason being, I've anticipated the meta downsizing from super heavy bipeds to more of a midweight due to the Bjorzel nerf. So the goal of BVO is always to kill in 2 staggers. So if I'm using Slicer, it is now overkill to use it, because you kill in 2 staggers, but so does Pulse Blade. And Pulse Blade is more consistent and easier to use. As for the 6L back missile, I prefer that because the best missiles are the ones that hit, and I find that the 6L hits reliably more than other missiles. Really good for CQC as well. As for the head part, I chose the head part mainly because of its scan as well as its stat density. There might be other heads that have more stability, more defenses, more AP, but I like the combination of stats that this one brings.
And for JC, can you explain the reason that you use the aperitif, the hammer, and the barrel head instead?
After the patch, Imperative kind of fell out of favor with a lot of people, but I found that it can be used in a certain niche where you use it to set up assault boost jousting, like engagements. So you'll Imperative first, then immediately start assault boosting, and depending on what happens, you'll either go behind your opponent through a circle boost, and they'll get distracted and get hit from behind with Imperatives. You'll either stagger them, in that case they'll take a lot of damage from Imperatives. You can even sneak in a kick and micro stagger them and they'll get hit by a few as well. Imperatives also have really low EN load, so you can afford like a better head, and it's a bit of a gimmick. I'm not gonna lie, and MLT6 is definitely a safer option, but I like the fun that Imperative offers. The hammer it's like a very generalist melee. It can deal with both heavy and lightweights. The first hit will always land at under 90 meters, and the second hit will land at 80. And when you fire the first hit, it will actually knock you back by 5 meters, and if it hits the opponent, it will also knock them back by 5. So you want to use hammer at 70 meters and under if you want to connect both of them.
Yeah, I believe it's called like the lightweight counter too, right?
Yeah, it's specifically aggressive towards lightweights. Being able to afford a little bit more EN. I chose Varelhead because it has probably one of the best defensive stats in the game. I found that Varelhead actually has almost 9% more effective AP than Mind Beta, for example, which is also popular with lightweights. And what you lose out on attitude stability doesn't really matter because most common breakpoints that stagger us usually do it in 2 hits anyway, so like Zims and Zukas. What you do lose out on is the scan. So the scan is a bit different than Mind Beta and VP44D, in that it's shorter and also lasts shorter, but that's about it. I just like having that defensive value.
Yeah, there is something that I think is pretty crucial to the BVO formula that not a lot of people seem to know, and that's a little technique called quick boost sliding. All this is when you quick boost into a melee attack, your quick boost momentum carries into the melee starting animation. So this is especially important on Slicer, because Slicer will stop you in place and do it if you have no momentum. The quick boost will just kind of power through it. It'll allow you to close distances much faster.
That's right. The same can apply to Hammer, actually. This isn't really tech, but it's more a fundamental level. When you're playing BVO, you really need to have an understanding of when to engage and disengage. We call it the stagger war. Whenever you're exchanging ACS with another opponent and you lose that exchange, as in they deal more ACS to you than to them, you want to disengage. But if it's the opposite, you want to keep pressing on no matter what. With the nerf to Wurzels, for the patch, we'd struggle to disengage against Wurzel builds, so things like 432, Zimmerman rushdown builds, they are able to keep up with us during disengage, but now that may no longer be the case because of the Wurzel nerf, so yeah, we're sitting pretty good right now.
A lot of tech has been removed because of patch. Has this affected how you both use the BVO build?
Hammer used to whiff a lot whenever it made contact with terrain, and it would even do that even if you hit your opponent. But now, if you hit your opponent first with Hammer and then hit a terrain, it won't whiff and you'll be able to use that second hit. So you can no longer hug walls to kind of protect yourself against the second hit of Hammer. Hammer's been adjusted, buffed in a way and nerfed in another way. So other melees now are able to swap buffer. So you can now queue up when you swap your melee out of another action, like for example a kick. And that creates like frame perfect opportunities to do a melee punish. But this does not apply to Hammer and Chainsaw. So in that regard, it's kind of behind now. I also have a background in digital art, so hard surface, weapons, vehicles, and armor. And I've also had experience working on custom decals in other racing games like Forza Horizon and Ballistic NG. And I enjoy creating really flashy high-tech liveries that definitely say that, yeah, this is from like a century ahead. The intention behind Scorpio was to make it look more like a rally car than a war machine, using decals that make it look like it was sponsored by a bunch of companies and, giving it this sporty flair. So, in other words, I'm made for the racetrack and I go really fast.
Yeah, so a friend of mine sent me a picture of a fish one day called the blue sea dragon, and he was like, hey, this fish reminds me of you. It paralyzes larger fish like your vientos against heavyweights, and then it slowly eats them like your Sticer. And I was like, you know what? That's really cool. I want to make an AC like that. So I put it together, and the nautical theme inspired me to give it the name Rising Tide, based off of the phrase "a rising tide raises all ships." And I really felt like the BVO style was my rising tide that allowed me to get higher as a ship.